Now that I've got you alone, you can tell me exactly what I want to hear. Hi, I'm Scott Ross, and we're back with War Stories, and this is Volume 4, or in the past we've been saying Episode 4, but I can't do that with Doug Chiang, who's my guest today, because it's really Episode 7, and you Star Wars geeks will get it, but Star Wars geeks will also get its Episode 7 and beyond, as Doug Chiang just said. Mm-hmm. Doug and I have known each other for a long time. We weren't, like, actively involved all the time, but I guess you started at ILM when? What was the year?
Yeah, I started in '89. I think it was the last week in February.
Wow.
Because I came up for a 3-week project. And I don't know if you remember what that was.
What project was it?
It was a bid for a film called Island Robot. And it was kind of a blue sky pitch. And basically it was a 3-week contract. And I packed up everything and moved up north on the hope that I would be able to stay.
And so who contacted you? Was it Steve Beck at the time?
It was Steve Beck and Rose.
And Rose Beck.
Yeah. And it was really fun because I remember I met them down in LA and I kind of showed them, my portfolio. And it was a little bit of an audition. And, going backwards, I've been trying to find my way to ILM since I was 15 years old. And so when I got that call from Steve and from Rose, it was like, this is my opportunity.
So you meet him in LA, and was it a recruitment meeting? Were they down there looking for people?
No. It was more because Steve and I worked together at Digital Productions. So Steve was my boss there, and so he kind of knew about me and what I could do. And when the company went under, we all separated, and I went freelance. And so he kind of knew that I was very interested in working at Industrial Light and Magic. And so I think when he had this project, he was looking for new talent, and he gave me a shot.
Right.
And so that meeting was really to show Rose my portfolio.
So if you talk about, if you could sort of like, so you like so many of these other people out here are 15 years old or 20 years old, 21 years old, and really driven by your art and really trying to perfect your art, and you have a dream, and the dream is to ultimately work in the film industry, and for your dream to not only just work in the film industry, but to work at Industrial Light and Magic. So how did that path happen?
Yeah, that happened I couldn't have planned it, because I remember when I saw Star Wars when I was 15, I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to get into the film business, but I didn't know how. I grew up in Michigan, and Michigan's pretty isolated in terms of the film industry. The following year, I saw the making of Star Wars, and that completely opened my eyes. I mean, I saw people behind the scenes doing things, building models, shooting miniatures, and I realized that's what I wanted to do. And so in my mind, it was kind of like, okay, how do I do that? And I thought, okay, well, the simplest thing would be I should make movies myself, movies like Star Wars. And that's when I started making my own Super 8mm movies with my father's camera. And I would spend, long weekends and long nights in the basement on these tabletop miniatures and just shoot these short 3.5-minute animations. And it was great because I didn't know what I was doing. I was learning on the fly. But it was a really fun experience, and that kind of cemented my goal and my dream. And what really further propelled that was that some of my teachers saw my movies and encouraged me to submit them into animation festivals and film festivals in general. And at first I was kind of like, well, no one's going to want to see these because these are not really coherent stories. But I submitted them. And surprisingly, they started winning, and I started to get more attention, and it really kind of gave me a strong foundation of confidence of like, okay, maybe this is a viable possibility. I still didn't know how.
Did you have support from your parents at that point?
I did.
Were they saying, go?
Yeah, it's a curious thing because, coming from the typical Asian family, they want us to be, doctors and engineers. Exactly. And art was really not a viable career. This kind of was okay because it was kind of unknown. And for me, it was great because it combined all of my passions. I mean, it combined storytelling, filmmaking, model building, animation, and artwork. And they were very supportive. I mean, especially since they were, seeing that I was creating something that was kind of interesting, And to be honest, I really wasn't quite sure where it was going to lead me. I just knew that I had to do this. And I just knew that I had to somehow make it out to the West Coast. And so my target was ILM.
Were your parents involved in the arts at all, or were they, no?
No, my parents, my father was an engineer at Ford Motor Company. and my mother, was a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
But she actually could draw, and even though she really didn't. And so I think that's where I kind of got a little bit of my.
So genetically, you got your artistic sensibilities from her.
Yeah.
And brothers and sisters?
Yeah, I have one brother and a younger sister, and they both drew as well. My brother actually is 4 years older than me, and I always considered him to be the better artist of the family because he was just like amazing.
What's he do?
He's a car designer, so he's a chief car designer now at Volvo. But he went down the automotive path.
So the Chiangs are underachievers.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I was really curious because he has a passion for cars, which I didn't.
Right.
And I just couldn't, see myself designing cars. But he loved that, and he found his career path in that direction. I knew I wanted to draw, but I was more passionate about filmmaking.
Film, right.
Yeah.
So did you make your own armatures?
I did, yeah.
How'd you do that?
No, see, that's the crazy thing is I got some books on animation, and we didn't have any tools. We didn't have a workshop. And so the closest thing I could come up with was actually using soldering wire. I mean, I experimented with different wires for armatures to see which one would bend properly. And soldering wire actually worked great because it would hold. It was very soft, but once you move it, it didn't flex back, not like brass or some of the other metals. And so I kind of, made it up and made it work. And it was fun because I was kind of inventing as I was going. I was just kind of stumbling around, trial and error, finding the techniques that worked.
How cool. So for those of you at home that are watching this is not an atypical story. This is a typical story for a lot of folks that I've gotten to know through my career that had that incredible passion when they were young. And whether it was even in the art department, John Bell and the things that he did, or you speak to Phil Tippett and stuff that he did, Kenny Ralston, Dennis Murin, all of those guys had a similar kind of sensibility that they were a little older than you, and so they were inspired by earlier folks, Ray Harryhausen and the like, and you get inspired by the people on Star Wars and. And Will the Circle Be Unbroken? Really, really cool. And the other thing that I've been getting out of these talks too is that, it wasn't driven towards a financial goal. It was driven towards something that you were just driven to do, and that you were taking risks all over the place.
Yeah, no, it was literally just making stuff up and having fun. And I remember it's great that you mentioned Ken Ralston because when I finally made my way to ILM, he showed me some of the student films, and they were great. I mean, they were exactly what I was doing.
That's right.
On a different level, but it was like, okay, we had the same childhood.
That's right.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. So now you decide to move to LA and you get hired by Digital Productions, which is Bob Abel's company?
Yeah, no, Digital Productions was one of three companies, or three major computer graphics companies. So it was Digital Productions, Robert Abel and Associates, and then Omnibus.
Oh, right, and Omnibus.
And so after UCLA, I was offered a position to design and direct TV commercials for Digital Productions. And it was great. This was, I believe, 1986, 87.
And who was Digital Productions? Like, remind me of who the...
Yeah, they were... Well, they were best known at that time, for me anyways, of providing the visual effects for The Last Starfighter. They had a Cray supercomputer, a mainframe
that's
computer.
right. Now I remember it. Now I remember it, yeah.
And what was amazing about them was that they were the pioneers. They were really trying to push this new media.
Computer graphics.
Computer graphics,
right,
yeah, because it was very unknown. And I remember when I was at UCLA in the animation department, we had a tour of this group, and I didn't know at the time, but it was Digital Productions, because I saw these images of very simple renders of spheres, marble balls, and they looked absolutely great. I mean, this was the first time I've seen computer graphics,
right.
And I was just amazed and astonished that the computer could actually render volume and lighting and materials to look that good. 2 years later, I find myself at that same company. I was like, oh man, okay, I really have to get in there, because that really intrigued me. I've been a huge fan of stop motion animation forever, and I realized I could see that this new technology could supplant stop motion, and I really want to see what the next evolution of stop motion was going to be.
But I always knew you sort of like you came into the art department. At ILM, we had an art department, and I tried to replicate that at Digital Domain when I started. It was tough, but it was one of the few places in the world where front art, illustration, really drove creation, like it does in films, as it often does in films. And ILM had the foresight to be able to realize that the only way that they were going to be able to bring the ideas and concepts to light, especially on the pitch part to our clients, was to make presentations with great looking art.
Yes.
So when I first met you, you were part of that team, and I had no knowledge that you had sort of stop motion animation.
Yeah.
You were a great artist, and I saw you as an artist and an art director, but it comes sort of as a surprise to me that you had all of that camera background and stop motion background.
Well, thanks. I mean, that was kind of the irony, is that, coming to Los Angeles, going to UCLA, studying film, you would think that, okay, that's the right path to become a filmmaker. But, like everything else, Los Angeles is filled with many of the same, people with the same passions. They all want to be writers, directors.
Right.
And so I had a hard time getting a film job as a filmmaker. And, going through the front door was just impossible. So I went through the back door, through art. And so art was my in. And I found that I could get jobs in the film industry by doing storyboards and by doing concept designs. And in a curious way, I've always had that passion of doing artwork, but I never really saw it as a career. It was kind of ironic. And in some ways, when I started down that path, I was a little bit at a disadvantage because I didn't go to art school. And a lot of my peers at that time went to art schools.
And that's where recruiting was happening.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And so in some ways, I got in there because I could draw. I drew all the time. And it became this thing where I felt like I was always playing catch up, because every time I got into a film, one of my first projects was working as a concept designer on Back to the Future 2. And that's where I first saw John Bell's work.
Right.
And I saw Tim Flattery, Ith, Michael Chaffee, and they were kind of, the leaders of the industry at that time, and me being the rookie coming in with no film experience at all in terms of design, I felt very inadequate. And it was interesting because I remember looking at John's work and it was like, wow, how do you draw like that? How do you color like that? How are you doing this? And it started sort of a drive for me to learn that. And the difficult challenge was to, learn it by just observing. I didn't want to bother John and say, hey, can you show me how you make that? Right. And so I kind of observed it, and that's where, my sort of skills now are broken in some ways, because they're kind of what works for me, but I don't think it's the right way to teach anybody.
The funny thing is that you interestingly enough in your life, you wind up in these environments, sort of, the universe delivers stuff to you in a way, and you wind up in these environments which totally informs your career. You walk into the ILM art department where there are these superstars working on the most cutting edge films, and now you're doing what you're doing, which is, the extension of that, actually the culmination of all of that.
Well, thanks. It's funny because it is kind of a childhood dream come true. My goal was to always come into the ILM art department and be part of that team, because I knew once I did that, I would be working with the industry's best.
Did you worked on Back to the Future? You worked on Rocketeer as well?
No,
you didn't.
Not yet. Yeah, no. It's I came in just after that started. I believe, yeah.
Because that was another interesting situation from an art department. Here comes Joe, Joe Johnston, who was the head of the art department on the early Star Wars movies, and then is recognized as a director and brought in on a movie that has trouble by Marty Katz and the people at Disney to direct The Rocketeer, and that launches his directorial effort. So. As a filmmaker, is that something you'd want to do? Do you want to direct?
No, that's my passion. In some ways, Joe's path became my model, because I kind of saw what he was doing, and I loved what he was doing with art and filmmaking. And I knew that for me it would be really hard to do that. And so in some ways I set a goal way out there, but I was trying to be more realistic about doing small steps. And so I set some intermediate goals, and those became more important to me. At the end, I always wanted to. And when I published my first book, Robota, I spent 12 years trying to get that sold as a film. And we came so close. It's one of those things where many people
Scripts were developed?
Scripts were developed. We had
real
pitches.
Great writers?
Yes.
Great script?
Oh, yes.
What happened?
Yeah. No, we actually came close 3 times. And it was one of those things where it was...
Wait a second. This is a really important lesson to learn, okay?
Yeah. No,
pay attention now.
It's a story about failure.
Well, it's a story about how people try to, even incredibly talented, well-connected. You were at the top of your game. You're frickin' Doug Chiang at ILM. You're working with all of the great people.
Yeah.
You're as connected as anybody can be in the film industry, and you have a great project and great art, and you tried 3 times.
Yeah, no, I tried 3 times, and it was great because Robota started as a passion project for myself. I mean, at that time I was working on Star Wars, but I had to, do my own thing as well. It's just like many artists, we always have our day job plus our personal passion, and Robota was one of them. And when I really got into it, I mean, it was a story that I was very passionate about, and I wrote and developed, and I wanted to illustrate it. And, getting a book published was one of my goals. And it was interesting because that was one of the first steps to sort of the end goal of getting it developed as a film.
So that was in the process. You figured, okay, if I get a book published and that book does well, they'll pay more attention to it. Yeah, okay.
Exactly. Because I was being very methodical about that. And my first obstacle was really trying to sell it to publishers. And it was interesting because they loved the property, they loved the artwork, they liked the story a lot, but they felt that the risk was too big because I was an unknown. And they said, if you can partner with somebody who's more well-known in publishing, we'll do it for you. And I found Orson Scott Card, who's a very well-known novelist.
Know him well.
Yeah. And so on a fluke, I called him and said, this is Doug Chiang. I'm working on Star Wars. So I used the Star Wars connection to kind of leverage it.
As you need to.
Yeah. And basically, we started talking, and we got along really well. And I sent him the outline that I had, and he really liked it. And so he actually signed on. And so we collaborated. And so he ended up writing the final text for it, and we got the book published by Chronicle Books. And so it was great because that was the first step. And from there, I now had a property that was starting to be branded. And I took that, and then I started to develop the sort of the bigger version of it, which was going to be the film version of that. And I knew the story that we had written was very comprehensive because in some ways I was laying out like the whole world, and I knew the film was going to take a small slice of it. And my goal was really ambitious, where it was going to be a film, a game, other publishing, comic books, the usual.
Happy Meals.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No, that's believe me, I was very delusional at that time.
That's all
but
right.
you need that,
because
I didn't know any better.
Right.
And so those were the first steps. And so I carved out a section, wrote a story, a screenplay, and found a great producing partner, Nick Wessler and Carrie Selig.
I know Nick really well.
Yeah,
He's great.
And they signed on, and they were believers.
These
in
are
this.
players.
Yes, exactly.
This is not just good people. These guys have credits.
Yes, exactly. And they were very well known for finding independent properties and launching them. And so I thought I had found my perfect producing partners, and we put pitches together and started to take it out there. And it was interesting. The first reactions were actually quite positive. That they all were very intrigued by it. They loved the story. They liked the artwork. And it was one of those things where I was very adamant that we could do this for a lower budget. But the executives that we were pitching to weren't convinced. No, because they saw in their mind it was either 120 plus film.
So was this before 300?
It was.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And it was a struggle because we were always thinking, okay, because of the circle of people that I was with and my background in visual effects, I was convinced that we could do this, efficiently for like 60. It may not be ILM quality work, but at least it was more realistic. Unfortunately, we couldn't convince anybody, and it was a frustration that we had because they wanted to sign on, but they knew that in order to do it, it was going to be 120 plus, and that was
Did you
way
want to
too
direct it?
I did.
So
not at first. At first, it was like, okay, let's just do this. And it was interesting because, by that time, I had developed a relationship with Jim Cameron. And when the book came out, I showed it to him, because I got a little blurb from him supporting it. And I was actually quite honored because he actually liked it a lot. And there was a period where, for a couple months, he was contemplating
producing it
and directing
and
taking it over.
What year was this?
Oh boy. This was after the book, right before the book came out, so it was probably about 2002. Book was published in 2003, so I got his blurb right before the book came out. So he's seen the manuscript, he's seen all the proofs. And it was really exciting because, and I think that was the reason why, he gave me a wonderful quote for that, because, he knew and had worked with Orson Scott Card before. And when I, heard that...
Plus, I'm sure he's a big fan of your work.
Yeah, from, Terminator 2 and all that. So I kind of had developed a little bit of sort of
a relationship.
Yeah, relationship with him. And then prior to that, I actually, was designing some work for him for a project that he wanted to develop on the side before I came to ILM. So there was a building relationship. But for me, having him just even be interested in Robota was a huge honor. At the end, he turned it down because it was too close to a story that he was developing. And so, I said that was okay. And that's when Nick and I, along with Kerry, said, okay, well, here, what are our options? You want to go to
Who's
other?
Kerry?
Oh, Kerry Selig was the other producing partner. Yeah. And so we said, well, what are our options? Where should we go? Who should we go? And then that's when I said, we're trying to figure out who directors. Should we approach George? Would you want to take it? And I kind of knew that George wasn't interested in outside projects. Yeah. And so that's when I said, hey, how about if we pitch it that I could co-direct with somebody? Because I really wanted to do this. And Nick was totally on board. And so we went out there. And so that was our pitch package for the next 7 or 8 years.
Could you have let me, for the audience for a second. So oftentimes people ask me, what does it take to get a movie made? And it's really, really simple. It only takes one thing, money. That's all it takes, just money. If you have money, get a movie made.
Yep.
So the right amount of money. And then the next question is, what does it take to get a great movie made? Forget it. If I knew that, I would be making great movies. But to get a movie made, all you need is money.
Yeah.
And to get money, particularly for the size and scope of film that you wanted to do, you need what's known in Hollywood as attachments.
Yeah.
Right? So you went about it in the right way, where you build a book and you build a relationship and you get Orson Scott Card on board, who's like, a well-known author, and then you get the book published, and then you bring Nick Wexler on board, and this is a world-class producer, and then you bring Jim Cameron into the fold, and did you name him, or would he have come on board as an executive producer?
I don't think we ever thought of that. Yeah. No, the funny thing is we knew, and I guess maybe it was sort of our hesitancy to kind of encroach on any friendship relationships, because I knew that he had a full plate. And I think, I remember one of the main reasons was that he was developing a project that was too similar, and there might have been a conflict of interest in that. And so I think we decided to just kind of steer clear of that.
Because it almost seems like the next card, because in some ways this was the vehicle for you to direct, and so in some ways you want to stay on that vehicle. You don't want to let it go. Jim Cameron could have said when Terminator came about, yeah, you're right, we'll let whoever it is direct it, but he said no, I'm going to direct it. And you seem like me, like a student of history, you follow people's careers and process and whatnot. And it was Arnold being attached to Terminator that allowed Jim to direct the movie, right? Yeah. So it's all about movie stars, right?
Yes, exactly.
Especially if you're a first-time director, you have a world-class author, a world-class producer, and a first-time director whose concept is theirs and who has a track record. And now the missing piece to get the money is a movie star.
Right.
So did you go after that?
We didn't. I mean, we actually had our wish list. There were a lot of unknown or up-and-coming actors at that time.
Right.
And it's curious because I was relying on Nick and his relationships and trusting him, and he was great. At building that.
Right.
For me, I started.
Though he doesn't make very many $60 million movies.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and so this was a reach for him as well.
Right.
And that's where I found it really exciting because he had the experience and the connections in the industry. I was bringing something pretty mainstream to him.
Right.
Because Robota is a like an action film.
Right.
It's a pop culture story.
Right.
And so it was kind of new territory for him as well. The curious thing is that we tried a bunch of different angles, trying to take a different perspective on it. I mean, I made a bunch of teasers for the movie and for the book itself. I developed a partnership with Sony ImageWorks to do the game, and that went on for 3 years. We actually did a prototype game, and so there's a lot of interest in the property itself.
Where does it sit now?
Unfortunately, it's dead.
Totally dead?
It's dead because for the same reason. I mean, we actually got a lot of great momentum, and it was curious because going off on a little tangent for the game aspect of it, which was happening concurrent to the film, I took it out there and I was approached by a lot of really well-known game companies, game developers, that just wanted to, and they saw the potential of what they could do with the Robota story and what they could build out of that.
Right.
And so it became this interesting thing where I had a choice.
Game or film?
Yeah, game or film or game with all these different, big players. And I was really attracted to Sony because they were, we obviously in the same industry.
Right.
And they were trying to get into the game arena, and I knew that they had incredible resources behind them. And their pitch to me was that they want to do this game at a film level quality. They really want to break into film with that, using all of their resources. And I bought onto that because, at that time I knew a lot of the key players there. Ken Ralston was there.
Ken was there. Debbie DeNice was there.
Yeah, Debbie DeNice was there.
Right.
And so I signed on with them. And then we developed so basically I partnered with them. We signed a deal to really get this going to the point where we started to develop the technology. We started to do prototyping. And it's the classic thing where we were very passionate. We all saw the vision, but the minute you go to a publisher, they just run the numbers. They go, Robota is an unbranded property. Right. Sony ImageWorks, huge cost because they're a visual effects company.
But wouldn't the publisher have been Sony? Because it would have run on a PlayStation.
No, well, see, that's the thing. That's a different company. We actually pitched it to the Sony Games. Yeah, I know. It's funny. It's kind of like you would think it's all one company, but it's not.
But it's not. Right.
No. So we went everywhere. I mean, we went to Sony. We went to THQ.
Jermaine Joya.
Yes. See, we know everybody.
We know everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
See, that's the good news about being in the business for all these many years is that we know everybody.
Yes. Yeah. No, and it was really flattering because we have mutual respect.
Right.
And so they, she was very interested in it, and in fact, they actually made a bid for it. To produce it independent of Sony, but I decided, I was going to stay loyal to Sony.
Right.
But it's curious because the publishers, and rightfully so, I mean, they have to look at everything and kind of do the math. And so we actually went down quite a bit. We did a game prototype, but we just couldn't get anybody to sign on. I mean, it was one of those things where the budget for this would have been $100 million plus. It would have been a 2 or 3 year production cycle. And they were very interested in doing game sequels and not a new IP.
Sure.
And especially one that they didn't own outright.
Sure.
So.
And they were having financial problems, THQ.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which they ultimately go away, right?
Yeah.
So, what studios did you take it to?
For Robota?
Yeah.
Took it to Disney. That was one of our first pitches, and actually, it went really well.
To Nina?
Yeah, actually, it was, yes. And it was interesting because we came out of that pitch. I mean, I'm not used to Hollywood pitches, and so I had no idea. And by the way, at that time, my writing partner was Robert Kamen, who wrote Karate Kid. And he was fantastic because he came on board, he loved it, and he just was, on board without a contract. It was just, handshake, like, let's come on board. So we pitched it to Disney, and it was great. The response was great. I mean, we came out of the meeting feeling pretty good, and the next day the vibe was pretty good because they started, talk about like, okay, well, how can we expand Robota? Can we actually, develop theme parks? Blah blah blah. Whatever. And it was really exciting. But then the phone went quiet for a couple of days, and then we got the call. It was like, okay, it was too high risk because it was unbranded. And so we always came so close. We would get great meetings, and then the kind of disappeared.
So the interesting thing now, being a sort of a wheelchair general, sitting back and knowing what I know and looking at what you're doing, it's sort of funny. Is like, you had almost all the right pieces, right? But you'd get to the point where you had an unbranded property with a first-time director.
Yeah.
And that was really the issue. So, and one of the big problems, I think, in Hollywood is that's the reason why not a lot of exciting new projects get made, because they continue to fall back on existing, IP and existing directors. And well, we had Steven Spielberg directed. It was called BFG. I mean, come on, and look at the box office on that, right? And even Steven Spielberg has a flop every now and then. It's just, you make enough movies, you're going to do it. So, could you reinvigorate it?
I thought about it. I mean, the book is actually going to be republished this fall. And so I kind of put it on pause for a little bit.
Have all the studios looked at it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And we took it all the way around.
And then, what year was that?
I think we first took it out probably 2004, 2005, and then we waited a little bit, and then we took it out again right before I started working with Bob Zemeckis in IMD.
Right.
And then so we took it out right before that. Same reaction, great response, but they were afraid. So then we kind of pulled it back, and then I got too involved with Image Movers Digital, and so I kind of really put it on pause. And then right after Image Movers Digital was shut down, I took it out again one last time. That was the third time.
So what's that, like 2000?
That was 2010, 11.
Yeah.
And it was kind of the same response. And unfortunately, because we were coming out again, it was a new team, so we're pitching to new
But
executives.
they still had coverage and notes, right? So they would go back into the files
I think
and pull
so,
it.
yeah.
Sure,
I'm not sure how it worked. I'm
course.
sure they did.
Yeah.
The unfortunate thing was that the market was being saturated by movies with similar themes, and so it wasn't as fresh anymore.
Right.
And so that became another obstacle. But we tried one more time, and it was the same response where, great story, see the potential in it, but
big risk.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so that was a hard point in my career, which is in 2011 when everything kind of shut down. IMD, sort of my passion.
So what if you took it to Alibaba?
I never thought about it. We actually
could it be reworked for a Chinese theme?
Yes, we thought about that, and we actually had Bruno Wu very interested in it as an investor. This was before he invested in Hollywood in a big way. And it was funny because I really wanted to meet him, and Bruno really wanted to meet me.
Right.
And through Nick, he was trying to arrange that, but then Bruno's advisors, from what I heard, I don't know if this is true, advised him not to, because he was afraid that we would get along and that they didn't want this because they saw it as too big of a financial risk. I know, so it's one of those curious things. It's like, okay, all right, that's okay. And so I see the potential in China.
Are there any issues? I'm approaching this like a producer right now. So I'm like, so are there any issues with like censorship from a China point of view?
I don't think so. I mean, it's yeah.
So if you reworked it as a Chinese American co-production, and would it get SARFT approval? SARFT is the Chinese government approval agency that makes decisions whether movies can be made or shown in China. And it's almost always has to do, it's funny, being a Westerner, my assumption was, so no sex. Oh, no, you could have sex, right? Oh, so like no drugs. Well, as long as Chinese people aren't doing drugs, you can have drugs. I said, well, what's the problem? Oh, you can't say anything bad about the Chinese government. Yeah. And you can't have guns and violence, right? That kind of stuff. So,
interesting.
If you're looking for, it's like it sounds like this is a passion project for you, and you've done all this work. If there was a way to be able to partner or bring on an American movie star and then go to China, I think you could be successful at it.
We never approached that angle because part of it was we wanted to keep it here stateside. I mean, we wanted Chinese investors to be involved if we, to get the film going, but we want to create a control. And I think part of the fear was that, if we sold it or partnered with a Chinese company, that we would basically be shut out of that process.
No, not at all.
No,
not at all. As a matter of fact, they don't want that to happen. First of all, there's a couple of good things about it. You're Doug Chiang, and so immediately as who you are and your ethnicity, the Chinese government will absolutely embrace that. They will embrace it. It makes no difference you're from Taiwan, Taipei. That they see you as an Asian face, and they like that, right? So that's number one. Number two, they really don't want to have creative control over it. They really don't. What they want to do is they want to make American movies that glorify China, right?
Yeah.
And so if there was a way to wrap that project around a Chinese theme, if you could rework it around a Chinese theme, and if your hero could be American,
Okay.
but your heroine was to be Chinese, now they're excited about it. And money's not an option.
Right.
That's not an issue. It's 70 million, 80 million, 100 million, it's okay. And if you wanted to do the work, you could do the work at Base Effects. Right, which is basically re-engineer it. So you go to Chris Bremble at Base Effects and you say, we're going to do it through you, and you're going to hire ILM.
Yeah, right.
Right, as opposed to going that way, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a shot there.
Wow, okay, well, shoot, maybe we should partner
We
together.
should talk about that.
I know, exactly.
We should
Offline.
talk about that.
Yeah.
So now, you go and you get into ILM, you're working in the art department, and then what made you make the transition to Bobby Z?
It was interesting because it's my whole goal since I was 15 was to always work on a Star Wars movie. And so when George announced that he was going to do the new films in 1995, and I was honored to be hired to run the art department, that was fantastic. That was a dream fulfilled, and it was really great. Those 7 years that I worked with George was absolutely amazing. I mean, I learned so much. And I think it was because I wanted to do my own project, because I had Robata on the side, and I had a publishing deadline. And so after 7 years, I knew that in order to fulfill my dream of getting Robata as a book, I had to take 6 months off to finish the 40 paintings that were left to do. And so I asked George if I could take a leave of absence. And this was after, right during the shoot of episode 2. And so all the heavy lifting for the design work was done, and there was going to be a little bit of a pause while he shot. And so I thought, okay, this would be the perfect time for me. Let me just sneak away, for 6 months. And he was very supportive. And so I went home and I started basically, working on the book, finishing it. And that's when I started getting calls from people.
Steve Starkey.
Yes. So Steve Starkey. It was funny. I ran into Steve at the gym at Skywalker Ranch like 3 months before that. And I had seen Steve from way back because I had worked on some of Bob's films, like Death Becomes Her and Forrest Gump. Sure. and so we just said hi, and he asked me what I was doing. I said, I'm still in Star Wars. And because he, comes up and he still has a place in Marin County and he uses the ranch. And so I didn't leave anything, I didn't think anything of it. And then literally when I was taking my leave, he called me and he goes, hey, I heard you were, taking a little break. Do you want to just come down to LA and just consult with Bob? And we're trying to get this new movie made. And we're just kind of curious to explore what the options are. And this was Polar Express.
Polar Express, yeah.
And I came down and, I'd worked on Bob's films, but I never really worked with Bob.
Him.
Yeah,
right.
and during those first meetings, it was just amazing. I mean, Bob and Steve and Jack Rapke, they were just such a great producing directing team.
Right.
And I loved the energy. And so I came down and I basically consulted with them for several weeks. And it was wonderful. It was basically, we came down, we had a round table meeting to discuss, okay, what can we do? Went away. Bob was writing his treatment of that time. And so then, I would go away, go up north, and I would just kind of do some illustrations, and then we'd come back and we'd meet again. So we had weekly meetings, and it was, that time it was really fascinating because Bob was, writing this story. He was very passionate about it. I was providing some artwork along with several other artists. Bob was basically pulling his brain trust of artists together to help figure out what this movie would be. And the imagery that he was seeing, he was really excited about. And so how it evolved was that on a flight, Steve told me this afterwards, that on a flight back from the East Coast, Bob and Steve were sitting together. And they were just talking and like, okay, how do we do this movie? And Steve said, maybe we should get Doug involved. And they were worried about,
pissing off George.
Yeah, exactly. But then Bob said, well, I need somebody like Doug who's actually, painting the images that are really the images of the movie.
Right.
We need to kind of do that. And I don't know how they worked before, but they were excited by the imagery that I was producing because they saw it as what the movie would be. And so Steve at that time offered to talk to me, and so this was Steve relaying it to me later, so I'm not sure if I'm replaying it right. But he called me and said, hey Doug, crazy thought, would you be interested in kind of joining? and actually it was really exciting, and I said, okay, well, I better check, because I wasn't sure on that. And it was one of those things where he said, okay, well, Doug, if you want to, Bob really likes your work, and this could be a great opportunity. It's high risk. And I kind of weighed it all out. And at the end, the funny thing was, I loved that risk. I knew we were going to do something new, something very different. And there was like a high probability of failure. Mm-hmm. And I was taking a huge career risk of leaving Lucasfilm to do this.
And leaving Lucasfilm in the middle of episode 2, and episode 3 is going to happen, and your whole boyhood dream is to work on Star Wars. And so you're walking away from Star Wars to work on a movie that could have failed terribly.
Yeah.
So where'd that come from?
It was insanity. No, I literally thought it over and I thought, wow, this is too good. I have to do this. And that's been kind of a little bit of a pattern for my career. I enjoy taking those risks. And this was probably one of my biggest risks, was to do that. Actually leave something that I really was passionate about, and had a lot of respect for. To try something very fresh with the hope that maybe this could develop into something new. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and George was very supportive.
Mm-hmm. As he always is.
Yeah, exactly. And so I signed on, and then I ultimately became co-production designer for Polar Express with Rick Carter. And that started,
Love Rick Carter.
Yes, and that started a really wonderful relationship where Rick became my mentor for that. And it really cemented my relationship with Bob. And the more we got into it, I really enjoyed their philosophy. They were very, family oriented. Their key thing was that, we were all about working with really good people.
But it seemed to me from the outside looking in is that what Image Movers was was sort of a reincarnation of what ILM was, right? So as Steve was a producer at ILM.
Yes.
Worked on Roger Rabbit with us,
Yes,
right? He was
right,
the Roger
yes.
Rabbit producer. So Steve, it was like a fresh new start of a company that was sort of like ILM, doing new things with a director that wasn't George, but it was Bob.
Yes.
And so it was sort of the version 2.0 is what it seemed like.
Yeah.
So is that what excited you?
It was, and it was actually Bob as a filmmaker. I remember working on his films, from seeing what he did with Back to the Future, and then working with him on, Death Becomes Her, and then Forrest Gump. They were all very different, but I was always excited that he always pushed, the boundaries of storytelling, pushed the media, visual effects, just pushed things, and I love that.
Can't forget Moms Love Mars.
Oh, Mars, yes.
What was that movie?
Yeah, Mars Needs Moms.
Mars needs moms, right?
Yeah. No, and it's great because I think, when I signed on to do Polar Express, I knew Bob was a filmmaker,
right.
and I knew what he was capable of, and I loved that he kind of pushed things. And I think that really excited me, was to, if I kind of develop a relationship with, Bob and Steve and Jack Rapke, and that they were going to push me, and that I would probably grow the most. And so once I signed on, I didn't look back. And in hindsight, it was actually a wonderful decision, because they gave me a lot of freedom, and they actually wanted to break the mold of regular production. I mean, they're the one that says, that Polar Express, set up your team up north. It's okay, because Bob's going to be in Santa Barbara, and the production team's going to be in Culver City, and so we can work off-site. Right. And it was the first time that I'd heard of a production doing that, and it all worked out beautifully. And so I formed my team in Northern California. I hired, some of the best people that I knew, and we had a sort of standalone art department. And after Polar Express, I decided to keep that team together, and that's how Ice Blink Studios was formed. And it was wonderful, because that was always kind of my secret dream, was to
have your studio.
Form a company of like-minded artists and work together. And we became this sort of a one-stop shop art department. That model now is
replicated
everywhere.
All over the place. Yeah.
And it was really great, because
it was a precursor in a lot of ways to Previs. And Previs winds up becoming sort of the new art department in a way, right?
Exactly. Because part of Ice Blink, I hired a lot of generalists. So there were matte painters, there were concept designers, 3D modelers, animators, physical model builders as well. And it was really great, because the way I looked at it was kind of like a mini ILM, of like 20 some odd people. And it worked really well. And we kind of, farmed ourselves out to various studios, saying, here's a complete package, if you want us to design this.
Turnkey art and concept art.
Yeah, and that was very attractive.
Right.
And it worked really well.
Then what happened?
Oh, no, it was great, because Bob loved that. And so he brought Beowulf.
Right.
So that was our second film as a studio. And I signed on as production designer as well on that. And then we just kind of designed it, and the company grew. And it was really great, because I think when we were doing that, Bob and Steve in particular were really excited by the workflow that was happening there. He liked the art department flow. And part of the promise at that time was that, we would do everything from front end to production to back end. And he really liked that. And we were doing that on a very small scale. And so about halfway through Beowulf, Dick Cook became very interested in this whole medium of performance capture. And to be honest, that's what excited me the most, was this whole...
Could Dick Cook be the nicest man in the movie industry?
Yes.
I have a business relationship with him now, and he...
Yeah.
They don't make him like that.
No, he's fantastic.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he was very genuine. It was just amazing that he saw and supported us. And one of the funny things is that, I knew that performance capture, or whatever this new thing was that we were doing, that Bob was passionate about, was absolutely high risk. We didn't really know how it was going to be received.
Sure.
But the excitement for me was doing something new. Developing a new art form, essentially. And I knew that we were going to stumble along the way, but that was okay. And I knew that a lot of people probably didn't like us, but that was okay. We were doing something new.
Right.
And I loved it, because Dick Cook had a great quote. And it was like, you could be one of three things. You could be the first, the best, or the only.
Right.
And we wanted to be two of those things.
Right.
The first and the best.
Right.
And that was our motive. And that kind of what was driving Image Movers Digital, was that whole philosophy. And so when he became passionate with Bob about it, during Beowulf, Bob and Steve and Jack Rapke, along with Dick Cook, approached me and said, okay, what would it take to take Ice Blink as a model and expand it. Form a company, a full production company out of this philosophy of an art department where there were no barriers, everything was very fluid. What you start at the front goes all the way to the back, and likewise the back end can come to the front end. And it was really attractive. It was like, wow, this is great. And this is where then I decided, okay, well, I have to do this somehow. I will close IceBlink and sign on to help with this new company. And that was the genesis of Image Movers Digital. Was that we had Disney supporting this. And the funny thing was, we did it with none of us really never having to build a company of that size.
Right.
I mean, I remember talking with Steve Starkey, and we were just like, well, Doug, how many people do you think it would take to make a digital feature? And we thought,
I don't know.
Yeah, it was like 260, 280.
Yeah,
Look,
I
that
don't
sounds
know.
about right. And that was our target. Ultimately, it became like 550.
That goes on, and then the walls come tumbling down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the result of that was what?
Yeah.
Disney pulled their support. Bob
Yeah.
decided he didn't want to make movies anymore.
Yeah. No, actually, we were getting into a really good rhythm. I mean, because in 4 years, we built the company from scratch.
Chris Coops.
Yes, Chris Coops came on board as a general manager to help run the studio side. Because for the longest time, we were running it like a film production. Steve, I
Blow up furniture.
Yeah, no, and I said, Steve Starkey, you're the GM. You're running it. This is, I'll take care of the company side, but you're essentially the studio head. And Disney said, no, you have to be like a real company. We have to hire a GM, a finance officer, and stuff. And so we actually became a real company. And the astonishing thing for me is that in 4 years, we built the company. Disney renovated 2 hangars for us.
I remember.
And we made 2 films from nothing. We hired everybody.
Right.
And one of the saddest part for me was right when we were finishing Christmas Carol, our first film. And that film killed us because, we were trying to put it together, and it had a hard deadline that was immovable because it was a Christmas release. If we had picked another film where we could be more flexible, that would have saved things a little bit more. But we knew we had to hit that first delivery date.
Right.
And so that kind of like, those growing pains were really painful. But when we finished it, that was when we heard the news that the cook left.
Right.
And we knew that we were dead. It was just kind of like inevitable. I mean, it always happens that we were kind of the blemish on the studio side.
I'm probably one of the blemishes. I mean, oftentimes when that happens, a new president of the studio comes in and an old one goes away. Almost everything gets torched and burned of the old president because he needs to start afresh. I mean, the amount of money that's wasted just by putting things in turnaround and shutting things down. It's crazy.
I know. No, it was really a heartbreak because by that time by the time the studio closed, we had finished 2 films and had 2 fully designed, and we were just getting to a point where the foundations and the growing pains were over. Granted, there were some issues in terms of the final products of the movie because of our inability to finesse the technique. But we had overcome those, and we were just ready to do it when the doors shut. And it was kind of like,
yikes!
I know, it was a really dark moment for me, and I know it must have been very hard for Bob and Steve and Jack. Yeah, it was just kind of because this was their dream as well. I mean, Bob staked his career on this, and
he's done pretty well since then.
Yeah.
As have you.
Yes.
As has Steve Starkey. As has Jack.
I know.
Because that whole thing. What's the line? If it doesn't work out in the end, it's not the end.
Yeah. I know. So, in 2011, I had to reset.
Right. And so your reset is Lucasfilm.
Yes, it was coming back to Lucasfilm.
And did you knock on the door, or did somebody say, hey, Doug Chiang's available, Image Movers is closed down, let's call him on the phone?
No, the irony is that when I heard Disney bought Lucasfilm and they were going to do new Star Wars, I wanted to throw my name in the hat.
Right.
But like anything else, it was like I had to stand in line. There was like no taking cuts.
Right.
And so I just...
So who do you interview with? Kathy?
No, not directly. It was because I was friends with Rick Harder, and I knew Rick worked with Kathy.
Right.
I've never worked with Kathy before. I approached Rick and said, hey, Rick, do you want to, see if we can work together on this film? And Rick said, oh yeah, let me talk to Kathy.
Right.
And then that's when Rick decided that he wanted to production design a movie. And I said, okay, can you bring me along? and so because, he and I get along really well, he said,
he's
okay.
Such a good guy.
Yeah. And so that slowly formed. But it was really hard because it was definitely like I had to earn my way back.
Right.
I know. At 52.
Hey, listen, you did a great job, and what an incredible career.
Yeah.
So you're doing episode 8.
Yeah.
And episode 9.
9.
Have you signed on for all 3?
Yeah, no, I'm fortunate enough that I took on a company staff role to be head
All
of
right,
the,
I saw your business card.
Yeah.
Executive Vice President and Creative Director.
Yeah, so I'm in basically the head of the Lucasfilm art department, and I oversee all the Star Wars franchise development in terms of visuals, all the design. So I get to touch all the films, theme parks, games.
So now, rotate back in the time machine, you're 15 years old, and here you are now at 52, and you're doing
I'm
everything.
54 now.
54. You're doing everything that you wanted to do when you were 15.
Yeah, I know, it's pretty unreal. I try not to think
Life
about it.
is
because,
good,
yeah,
man.
Yeah, no, but see, it's like, I don't want to blow it, because there's always that chance.
That
you know
the
what,
hammer
tomorrow-
could fall.
Yes, because I've seen that happen too many times to too many good people, and that's the way the industry works, and so that's why we always have to kind of, think that, our last project is our last. Yeah.
So, come on, camera. We know you can do it. Rack, zoom, and push at the same time. Give us a Spielberg move. This is War Stories, and this is Doug Chiang, and he's lived his dream, taken risks, saw opportunities, addressed failures, and now, in your profession really is you all want to be Doug Chiang. In fact, I want to be Doug Chiang.
No, I want to be Scott Ross.
But we'll trade.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot,
Appreciate
man.
it.